it's important to acknowledge where we misstepped and see how do we grow better. So apologies, Christy. That's what you spoke about? Well, I'm glad to hear that we're all aligned, so thank you.
Telepathically, yes.
Yes, so you are the middle sibling. So thank you so much. Thank you so much, Christy. So this second session is focused on narrative decolonization and co-creation. And it's important that we share because we have Trueness who was asking us, how do you guys speak so well? Why is this easy for you? And the conversation that we're having today is also very important to us. So we come from a tribe called Gumbi. So in Zimbabwe, we use totems. So Gumbi is our totem. And within our lineage, from the past, I think, 1,500 years.
I think so, exactly.
We have been known to be the ones that are in chiefs' courts. So we are the negotiators, the praise talkers.
Correct.
We're also, in Shona, they're called the Chipanga Mazano. So we're also counselors. And so we grew up in private school. So we didn't know this. We weren't exposed to it because a lot of what we were taught was from a Eurocentric lens. But part of our family decolonization is understanding who we are and what is it about us that makes us unique. And this is important because if you can't trace the good parts of where you come from, it's a unique selling proposition that you are missing out on. But I'm not the expert on this. I'm the family situation, but we're going to get a bit more about that. Marshall, over to you.
All right, so would like to first of all acknowledge as well the fantastic session, Christy, that you held. Please give a round of applause. I mean, we literally came in and everybody has been having rave reviews about what they learned.
From the gate.
From the gate. But for those who did not come through to Christy's session, she focused on being a pioneer of the aid to trade philosophy in the Zambezi region, demonstrating how trade, when designed intentionally, can move communities from dependency to economic agency. And we hope that spirit is able to move through into this session as well.
So as we get ready to introduce our next speaker, when we met her before we started setting up, we were talking about where she comes from. And she said, when you hear Pakistan, what is the first thing that comes to mind? Just quick show of hands, anybody? Cricket, thank you very much.
That's good, very positive, love it.
Anybody else?
Anybody else?
Okay, so I've got an example, and this is a social media one. So there is a woman from America by the name Onija Andrew Robinson who had an online sort of situationship with a 19-year-old that she believed was going to get married to her. So she traveled from America all the way to Pakistan, and then stuff didn't happen the way she thought it was, and then she became a viral sensation, right? And the one name that she always would call is Shabana, right? But what is so important about breaking stereotypes is you never know what moment will be viral. You never know what conversation will change your perception. And from seeing the clips of this woman, I had, again, only known about Pakistan from cricket, right? But the kindness of your people, the hospitality of your people is something that the world is never going to forget. So I know you're representing 250-something million people, but the hospitality of your people precedes you digitally.
Correct.
And so, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to introduce our next speaker, Amneh Shaikh-Farooqui. Please, try. Who is the founder of Polly and Other Stories and a global authority on cultural heritage and gender. Based in Pakistan, her work bridges tradition and enterprise, ensuring that cultural preservation and fair wages move hand in hand. A round of applause for Amneh. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So you are about to find out how Mike's and I are not friends. That is working, isn't it? Am I gonna? Yep, it's going. Give me a second, sorry. I think it's okay. We're good. I won't touch it again. Sorry. Did I do something to it? No? not at all. It's such an honor to be here. I wanted to say that I think for me, what was the most exciting part of this is my first time in Africa. And I have friends from Nigeria and Kenya, and we've been talking about this for years. So one of the first things I got to do was get on a call and say, guys, I'm cheating on you. But it's amazing. I've just been here 2 days, and I'm already overwhelmed by everything that I've seen and learned. You talked about the hospitality of my people. And gosh, what a brand ambassador. We never suspected that somebody who'd overstay their visa would become such an icon and make us all look so good. So the wonderful thing, you mentioned Shabana. That was the name of the police officer who had to tag along with this American lady. And so every time Shabana would move even out of frame, Onaija would say, Shabana, because it would, and it became really viral as a result. But what an incredible ambassador she's been for the country. But can I talk a little bit about your hospitality? I don't think I've seen anybody as warm and friendly. I got in and got told that as a solo woman traveler, I should not step out of the hotel. There was a lot of I shouldn't do's, right? And then I thought about what people would think about or do, and I thought about the similar don't do's for Pakistan. And I thought the list would be even longer. So the first thing I did is step out, because I thought, what's the worst that's really going to happen? And can I say, after a long walk and coming back and buying a lot of beautiful craft, I discovered that the biggest risk in Harare and Karachi is actually the same, that if you're walking after dark, you will inevitably go into a pothole. So other than disappearing into a drain, can I say that the city is amazing, and I've really enjoyed the 2 days that I've been here. So when I mean, and can I say also, going second after Christy this morning, I am more anxious than I needed to be, but also you did all the hard work. So now I'm hoping that we'll just have more of a conversation. I'm going to share a little bit with you about what we're doing in Pakistan, my work with the artisan space, but also maybe draw from some of the examples that you talked about this morning and how they apply in a different but similar context in many ways. So just to be clear, I'm not an expert, even though you guys were generous enough to call me a global one, which, there's misrepresentation and then there's misrepresentation, people. And I'm definitely not here to teach you anything. I think what I'm hoping that at the end of the 2.5, 3 hours we spend together, we will all have rewired one term in our mind, and that term for me today is value. And how we understand that word and how we can move from understanding our enterprises as a craft-based identity to a source of power and privilege. Because we are privileged, I think that's another thing that our cultures share, that we're ancient cultures with a giant tradition of oral storytelling, and there's so much that the world could benefit from learning from us. So I'm going to talk a little bit about my work, and for a lot of people, I think I'm a confusing character, which is fine. I have a very, very squiggly career, not neatly encapsulated, because for people, craft, fashion, and activism are kind of worlds apart. In our part of the world, they're seen as like activists kind of stand outside the local press club with placards, and they look very angry, and they definitely don't wear fashionable clothes. They wear hand-spun. There's a particular kind of khadi, we call it khadi fabric, that they wear, very Gandhian, if you will, and reminiscent. And Joe back there is wearing a dress with that fabric. Whereas, of course, craft is old school, it's seen as traditional, a little redundant, something that's always been there, a bit boring. And then fashion, of course, is the purview of fashionistas. It's frivolous, it's fun. But in my world, all three come together. And they come together in a way that brings me a lot of joy. So I'm hoping that you will be able to see that as well. That because I think what's interesting about craft, fashion, and activism is that they're always changing. They're always evolving. And therefore, by their very nature, these fields are meant to be disruptive. And therefore, I think they actually kind of have a very, very common core. So what I do in Pakistan is a couple of things, but today I'm going to focus on a platform that I run. It's called Pollyanna the Stories. It came out of working in social development for many years. I was part of a very large USAID-funded project back in the day. We were working with 75,000 small makers across the country in 6 value chains. But the value chain that I became most enamored with was the textile or craft one. And it's interesting that they put them both in the same category, right? So it tells you that about a decade ago, there wasn't even that distinction. And we were working with 26,000 women in villages with heritage skills. And the project died or ended, whatever you want to call it. I prefer death because I feel like it's a programmed death. Like our devices have a programmed death, I think those projects do as well. So when it ended, you had these incredible women who had been promised a market opportunity. During the life of the project, they were making 3x income. It was a 3-year project. Everything was great. But when the money died out, there was nothing left. And so I thought about it, and I was like, we know there's a market. We've trained them for this market. It's just ridiculous that this project has gone. And I thought about e-commerce. And this is back in 2016. E-commerce was a very new concept in Pakistan. Of course, COVID completely changed that. And I started a platform called Paulina the Stories with this idea that you would tell stories of craftspeople. I also run my own brand. We work with thousands of women in rural settings in Pakistan, mostly women, because they're the ones that cannot leave their homes due to socio-cultural reasons. I'm not going to say religious reasons because that's the common perception, but it's actually quite untrue. And you just need to go to a Muslim country like Indonesia, which is a much larger Muslim country than ours, to understand that women being at home is a social construct, and it is actually nothing to do with Islam. Yeah, so okay, see this guy is going to, yeah. So we consider ourselves an aspirational lifestyle brand and a slow fashion manufacturing platform because we make our own products in the old-fashioned way. There's very little machine, it's mostly handmade. Currently, we're working with 1,700 independent artisan makers and about 126 small businesses. At the highest end, we might be working with somebody like Batoka. We have, well, it's the truth. And we have a brick and mortar store, but we started off as an e-commerce platform and transitioned to brick and mortar, and we have a small pop-up as well. So yeah, our idea is to use heritage skills and create scalable models that can allow people to lift themselves out of poverty in a dignified way, but also to honor the craft. I do want to talk a little bit about, before I talk about the model, I want to talk a little bit, about Pakistan and our history as a craft region. So we're in the part of the world called South Asia. We're neighbored by India, Iran, Afghanistan, and China. So you can imagine just a very rich and ancient part of the world. We take great pride in considering ourselves one of the oldest civilizations. Cotton fabric going back 7,500 years, that was indigo dyed, was found maybe 2 hours drive from the city I live in. So that is how old textile heritage we have. We do take great pride in it. I think one of the things that has continued to bother me for many years is that while we'll take great pride in it, and you'll find the average Pakistani or the average South Indian really talking about what a rich culture and heritage we're from, and we love making coffee table books about it and showcasing at museums, the lives of those people who actually still manifest the living versions of those crafts are really, really kind of in a bad state. They live under the poverty line. There's no visibility, there's no voice. And that really bothered me. I was like, something we take such national pride in, how is it that we can allow the lives of the people who carry that, have carried it for generations for us, how is it that we allow them to live in such poverty? And I think that was one of the problems that I wanted to fix through the enterprise. So we leverage modern design. I think one of the things that we learned very quickly is that we are a very young population as well. I have to tell you this. 65% of our population is under the age of 30, which means that, so you understand, right? So they're online, they're very, very influenced by the West. They definitely want a modern aesthetic. Anything which is seen as too traditional is seen as dated, as redundant, and not exciting at all. So we try and look at affordable technological solutions because unlike Batoka, we actually started with a little bit of savings that I had. And that's it. So we started 10 years ago because I'd had it. I was between jobs. As I told you, the project had ended. I'd also had my second baby, who was a Velcro child. I don't know how many of you have had that experience, but my first kid was amazing. At 6 weeks, I strapped her on and I went right back to work. This little guy, I quit 2 jobs within weeks of joining them. He was like, you're going nowhere ever. So I think he's actually the major reason I did this, because I was like, I'm going to lose my mind. I mean, this is it. My life is over. All I'm ever going to do is nurse. I thought I would just never stop nursing. So I thought, okay, how hard can it be to build a website? That's why it started off as e-commerce, because I was like, well, there's YouTube. I could just teach myself to do it. And can I encourage everybody to have the same kind of ignorant hubris that I did? Because it is the best and most empowering thing you can do for yourself, is to have very little knowledge and huge ideas about changing the world. It's a formula for success. And unlike a lot of other social enterprises, we do not have a factory. So I do not have any production unit. So we treat each home that we work with, we call it a disaggregated factory model, where every artisan we work with, that's their home is a factory. And we put into place certain systems to make sure that they're doing it in a safe way, that they have access to the resources that they need, especially I think connectivity is a big one, especially as you get rural and remote. And that's how we try and work with the women in the villages. You're gonna keep seeing visuals of products that we make, and some of them are fairly traditional, but all of them are made using traditional techniques. So just a little bit of context of why I want to work with women in Pakistan specifically. So unfortunately, and this is in no way something I take pride in, Pakistan ranks the last in the world on the Gender Equality Index. We were second last for 2 years, but this year we've cinched the spot. So, and a lot of that, I mean, you break it down, it has to do with, when you look at why is it that we rank so poorly, it's specifically, I mean, of course, there's a lot of issues. There's a lot of violence against women. Women are fairly uneducated. The men are uneducated too, but 70% of our men have access to some kind of education. Only 40% of the women do. So there's a great disparity. And when you go rural, and it becomes worse and worse. So many women simply never leave their homes. There's a lot of, as I said, sociocultural constraints on mobility, which then impact education and productivity. So I think, but when you look at the craft sector, 65% of our makers are actually women. And 15% of our GDP comes from craft. And yet it's undervalued, right? So the women's role is invisible because it's seen as just something they do from home. Mothers teach daughters, grandmothers teach kids in the neighborhood. It's not seen as anything special. But women are, of course, custodians of this heritage craft. I specifically wanted to use this image because it's got one of the few communities in our country that does some beautiful beadwork. Of course, you guys have incredible beadwork in Batoka, what we saw this morning. And what I'm wearing now is just stunning. But we do have this community. It's one of our few tribal communities that is pagan, which is unusual, I know, for a 97% Muslim country, and they live in the mountains, and they have very particular rituals, and among them is this beautiful beadwork that they do. So women have always been the custodians of craft in the country, just under-recognized for it. I won't bore you too much on our model, but this idea that because we don't have a factory unit as such, right, because everybody's a maker and everybody's like got their own enterprise in a way, we work with what we call maker clusters, where we invest through training in business development specifically, design, pricing, and technology. Then we have our own sort of model where we have B2C, B2B. To be honest, B2C is our biggest component. Somebody was asking me just before we started about whether they could list on the platform, and I said, no, we're like the Pakistani Etsy if Etsy was fair and cared about their makers, which they don't. So we're the ethical Pakistani Etsy, or trying to be. So at this time, when we started, we did want to be the South Asian platform. And as a matter of fact, we had 2 brands from India, 1 from Bangladesh. We started with 20 brands, and we even had Afghan brands. We had a great brand from South Africa called Soko Shop. Yeah, we even had, so we were thinking really big. And then COVID hit, and it really brought us to our knees. And I think with the rising, we're talking about the costs of couriers and things. They've become so prohibitive that it just became impossible to continue. So for now, we're completely Pakistani. But the idea was that, we definitely, that's where we are right now, where we're trying to build an international wholesale platform as well. I think one of our issues locally is that Pakistan is on top of nobody's next tourist destination, or where are we going to go for a holiday? You guys are laughing. Were you planning to come? I'm just wondering. No, it's... You guys, you had posters everywhere saying that you were the 2025 destination to be at. You're pushing. Well, we're not even trying. As a matter of fact, as I speak right now, and I'm laughing, but we're at war with our neighbor again. So we're certainly not anybody's country. Now that impacts craft, right? Because a lot of industries, especially in South Asia, when you look at neighboring India, were developed, or the governments invested in them because there was tourists coming. And because we've simply never had international tourism, maybe in the 70s in the hippie trail, I believe, I'm told by my parents, but that's it. And it's not since then, unfortunately. So the craft is very much targeted towards locals. And I think that makes our marketing pitch a little bit different. We're not marketing to anybody else. We're talking to ourselves. Which in Pakistan is really interesting because unlike a lot of other countries, we do have an issue of loss of national pride for many, many reasons. I won't go into them. It's not meant to be a depressing story, but Pakistanis, if you speak to the average Pakistani and say, who are you? They'll tell you they're Muslim first, then they'll tell you their ethnic caste, and Pakistani will usually come third or fourth. They do not lead with, I am Pakistani. And that is also something, and I think it's related to craft. It's all related, right? Literature, music, craft. Unless you have pride in these things, how are you going to have pride in your identity? So we've talked a little bit about this, but basically the issue in Pakistan is that much of our craft is in the rural areas, completely disconnected from the center. Our big markets, or sort of modern buyers, if you will, are urban, educated, women like myself, really, in the three big cities, Karachi, Lahore, and Islamabad. And the makers are completely disconnected from them. When it comes to, Pakistan's a fairly connected country, like we have really good digital connectivity. 75% of our people are online. But again, when you look beyond the numbers and you start digging a little bit under the data, most of those are not smartphones. Many people cannot afford data. There's usually one full phone per household in the poorer areas, and it's managed by a man. So the women actually do not have as much access as the data would lead you to believe. So artisans, as a result, remain completely trapped in poverty, have no upscale value chain opportunities, and therefore they're also not investing in the craft. Our craft has been deteriorating over the years because it goes to low value markets. Parents are no longer wanting to pass it on to their children, so there's a huge loss of heritage as well. But, and I think much like you spoke about this morning, younger customers are interested. They want to know the story. They want to know, where did it come from? What meaning does it have? Why did people make this? Why did they stop making this? What does this motif mean? So I think we are at an opportunity now, which is prime for the digital world, for a particular kind of audience who cares about these things. But the space is hugely fragmented, which is why nobody invests in it, including the government. It's hugely fragmented, huge lack of trust between artisan groups themselves, massive issues of quality. There is little to no motivation to produce because, again, as I said, we are targeting entirely local audiences. Again, this is kind of what we do. We bring in technical expertise. We create small finishing units. We try and create them as much as we can within the community, so it becomes an other opportunity. Quite often, as we saw yesterday with David Whitehead in the conversation that we had there, that you can't just be producing the materials, you have to be looking at the finished product. And quite often, much like anywhere else in the world, that has been our issue. We're seen as the suppliers for things, and especially for cotton as well in our part of the world, right? So a lot of cotton is exported, but finished goods, not so much. And certainly not fashion. If they are, it's towels and denim. It's not high fashion. And then we bring in we work with a lot of young designers. We have our own team that works we have our own process of designing with community, which we're going to talk a little bit more about when I get to the co-creation part of it. And we also create sort of artisan hubs at a regional level. Again, these are highly informal structures. It literally might be the local mosque, somebody's home, which is used for, once in a while check-ins, because we certainly don't have the resources or the funding to do anything more at this time. And yeah, this is kind of like how our campaigns go. So that's a very traditional patchwork quilt. I think they're done everywhere in the world, right? I don't think there's any part of the world where patchwork isn't done. But we matched it with designs done by sort of young art students, and then did this entire campaign around women power. The woman whose image you see is a very famous singer in Pakistan, Noor Jahan. She's passed on now, but she's iconic. So our answer is a movement that features craftspeople at its centers. It looks at their stories. We do not work in a silo at all. We're really happy to work with everybody, which is why we have 126 businesses that trust us. Because as I said, that's a major issue in the sector. Nobody trusts anybody. But we take, like it's been a decade, everybody works with us and everybody trusts us. And there's a couple of reasons why, really simple reasons. One, we don't lie. Two, we just turn up when we say we will. Three, we apologize very quickly. And because we get things wrong all the time. And four, we genuinely care about the people that we work with. We really put our heart and soul into it. And I think the third thing, which is something I had to learn the hard way, is initially I would lead with a yes, like I would walk into every room with a yes. In my first job, which was when I was 21, so a very long time ago, I remember for 4 years, my boss gave me the same evaluation, like it was one line written in my end of year evaluation. In capitals, he would write, learn to say no. It's something I've struggled with my whole life, and that's a personal issue, and it obviously comes into my business. I do struggle to say no. I see an opportunity in everything. I want to work with everyone. And lately, like, you know, as you get into your 40s, you begin to evaluate, do I want to lead the rest of my life like this? Is this who I'm going to be? And you're constantly on this, at least I am, on this self-improvement journey. Well, this year I've decided I'm done improving. And I think I want to be that person who leads with yes, right? So I want to continue to be that person. I want to continue to bring that energy into rooms. As a matter of fact, I want to encourage other people to do that. Because what's the worst that will happen? It happens to me all the time. You get your heart broken a little bit. So you're reminded, what a privilege, that you have a heart, which I think is, in today's world, an increasingly rare commodity. So the almost monthly reminder when I have some teary moments that I have a heart is what I just lean into and feel grateful for, and I move on. But having said that, I have learned that there's one type of people I cannot collaborate with, and that tends to be the typical rich, big businessmen or venture capital. You were talking about that. I have pitched so hard to every venture capitalist that will enter Pakistan, and I can tell you it was a waste of time and energy, and they were never going to be the right partners. The only time I've tried to work with somebody whose values didn't match, it's been a disaster. So I think that is the one thing that I am learning to say no to, and everything else will forever remain a yes. So in terms of the opportunity, as I said, 15% of our people are employed by craft. 65% of these are, we call them HBWs. It's a very specific term used in our part of the world. It translates to home-based women, which is a lot of women, unfortunately. And that's why the digital aspect of this became so important. Having said that, they don't have the money for the phones and the connectivity, which remains like something for us to solve. We're a very young population, as I said. In Pakistan, most businesses are small, and less than 1% are owned by women. So the fact that we work with women-owned businesses is quite a big deal. So currently, we impact about 7,000 lives. This is our model for the platform. We work with entrepreneurs, as I said, and they stock with us. I know that says 120, but like, I don't know how, it should say 126. I don't know how to fix it now, it's too late. And that's our marketplace, which I said is online and in-store. And then we work with artisan makers where they make more money. In this, we make 25 to 30%, and in that, the margin is higher because we supply the materials, or we might be taking on a little bit more of the value chain. As you can see, there's a difference between the profile of the women we work with. I mean, Ghazal is an art school graduate. She lives in Karachi. She drives a car. Very, very different profile. She doesn't need my help in design. As a matter of fact, I could learn a lot from her. Whereas Jamila, of course, is from a traditional, very conservative tribe. Getting her out of the house is a really big deal. We have to negotiate with a lot of men in her community to be able to get to her. So it's a whole different kind of way of working. I'm not going to bore you guys with this. I should have left that. But our whole thing is bring dignity, power, human ideals back into retail. And as I said, we do this and this is the kind of hub that I'm talking about. This is in the mountains. So the women just sit around a stove, and then we'll have a meeting. And that's our office or factory, if you will. And then, of course, we work with more modern SMEs using technology. And we have our own brand. For our own brand, we've been really proud to say that we've worked a lot on traceability. We do work on living wages. We're one of the partners for Made 51, which is a global brand that kind of certifies that you work in an ethical way with refugees. We have a lot of Afghan refugees thanks to the war, although we're currently in the process of booting them all out of the country, so there's massive supply chain issues at our end, but yeah, so that's what we do. 85% of the businesses we work with are owned and run by women, and 55% of them employ women as well. About 15% of them have an overt social agenda, like for example, they might work only with people with disabilities or something like that. We also have a couple of groups that work only with trans artisans. So yeah, what's our big plan? To be fair, I know it sounds, remember hubris at the beginning? So 7,000 today to 50,000 in 5 years. And why are these numbers important? I know I sound a bit like I'm preaching to donors. It's because, again, I'll remind you, 250 million people, and we don't have a lot of other opportunities. So for us, that is a real part of what we're trying to solve. We do believe that the creative economy has cultural worth. I don't think I need to pitch this to anybody in the room today. This is usually my hardest slide, because I'm like, please, guys, you have to believe this. So for us, the culture and the stories of the artisans and their ancestors can be kept widely appreciated and alive if we continue to do this work. We try and encourage our 126 partners to also become both more. So we do go through an audit. We don't just take everybody on. That's a no that I'm learning the hard way as well. We do a brand audit, so we look at payments, we look at supply chains, and we try and help them improve it. Because when we are working in a particular supply chain, we know that there's relative transparency. We'll recommend vendors. We'll say, hey guys, we'll negotiate with this guy for you. Why don't you also work with him? Because this will improve your brand story as well. So in that way, we are continuously investing in our partners. About 40% of the country currently lives under the poverty line. We are quite a poor country. I don't know if you guys follow the news about Pakistan in any way, but we've had a lot of political and economic issues post-COVID, and the military has always been very, very strong. Let's just say we're not IMF's favorite either. We owe everybody money. So yeah, some of this might sound familiar to you guys. I was talking to somebody earlier, and they were like, our currency is the worst, and I was like, rarely have I felt poorer than I have since I've come to Zimbabwe. And they said, what do you mean? And I said, because $1 converts to 283 rupees of my currency. So when I tell people what I make in a month and I convert it to dollars, it's about $300 a month. So yeah, I do feel very poor in your country, right? So, but and people were like, no, you can't feel poor in Zimbabwe. I'm like, yes, I can. If I'm from Pakistan, I can. Watch me. And as I said, we do terrible on gender parity. Unemployment is rising, and women in the productive workforce. We used to be higher. We used to be about 25%, but post-COVID, it's fallen to 22%. And I can talk about why, but that's because a lot of women just fell out of jobs and did not go back. So this is versus a global average of 51%. We are also, unfortunately, the lowest in the South Asian region. But what can we all do together? And this is, I think, the spirit of which I hope to continue in the conversation is we can leverage the power of making and small business for incredible positive impact. I'm a big believer in small business. I think look at the climate apocalypse we're living through right now. I really don't think big is the answer for anybody. And I think that is one of the things that a lot of people are deterred by, that they're like, well, we have to scale, we have to be big, we have to scale. Certainly not. Scale at all costs. Anything that erodes your soul and why you started doing something is really not worth it. I mean, the world is dying because we're all thinking bigger, better, larger, more numbers. And unless the numbers are impact numbers, then in that case, let's go. But any other kind of numbers, I don't think we need to focus on. And I think we can all agree for something to be beautiful, the system that creates it should also traditionally are not allowed to be photographed. So I should explain just, so there's parda, which means to cover, right? So we are a fairly modest culture, which is fine. But parda, people think it's just clothing, right? They think it's just women not being physically seen, but it's actually much deeper than that. A lot of my work is in the gender space, and just before coming, I was involved in some research on image-based violence in Pakistan. And what the interviews showed me was something that even I, with my relative privilege as an educated, urban, middle-class woman who nobody has said, why isn't your head covered? I discovered that for so many women in the country, even your name being known outside the house is a breach of privacy. So forget your body, forget your physical presence. If some other man can say, I can name the woman in that house, or they can tell you how many women there are in that house, that is considered a breach of privacy. So when we were looking at, international platforms like Facebook and complaints, and how do you complain when somebody is like, harassing you, they don't understand concepts like this because privacy is so differently defined in our culture. So as a result of that, there's very little video, and we're very, very particular to get consent for photos, even though sometimes, when you're talking about that story that sells, and I kept thinking about it when you were talking about it, Christy, that how much easier it would be if we could just get that video or get those photos, but oftentimes it takes, even hands will take a lot of negotiation. And I mean, there's communities I can walk into now with a camera and not have to answer to anybody. But with newer communities, it takes you years before you would be dumb enough to even take out a camera. So documentation in M&E becomes even more layered because these are uneducated women. You can't photograph. Everything is so based on your word and what you're saying is true. So we were doing some work with Afghan refugee women living in a slum just outside Karachi, which is a huge city. Officially, I think we're 30 million people. Realistic, we're probably closer to 45. Well, I just know that the city has more people than all of Canada, so there is that. So we're a lot of people. And we were supposed to go in and do technical training in non-traditional skills. We were doing candle making and other fun things like that with the young girls, as well as documentation of their lives. And obviously they all stitch because it's such a big part of their culture. And they were, the language the UNHCR uses is host community and refugees, so they were meant to work together on this project. So they were Pakistani women, they were Afghan women. And even the Pakistani women are from so the borders are very arbitrary, right? So it's not like when you cross over to Pakistan, immediately everything changes. Not really. Culturally, they have more in common with each other than they would with somebody from a larger city. So we were just talking, and I think food is the secret sauce to any relationship. Like, it really is. So the secret ingredient, people ask me, like, how do you just walk into villages and you don't even know the language? You don't, because we're a very multicultural society, over 60 languages spoken in the country. I speak one of them. So, it's not helpful. And I was like, but like food, you just have a cup of tea. And I swear that cup of tea has been, there's some things, and some stereotypes about your country that are true. Over a cup of tea, you can be besties with anybody. So it just takes just a chai. And so we were doing some work, and I would regularly have lunch with them. And one of the things I started doing was a recipe swap, where I would be like, oh, you fed me something from your culture. Well, I'm going to cook, and I'm a disastrous cook when it comes to traditional food. I was like, I'll cook and bring you something that you may not have had. And in that recipe swap, I actually discovered some of the most fulfilling work of my life, because it became these tapestries, which they would share stories. And this particular one, is really heartbreaking for me. But it's about this Afghan girl who you see here. Her mother, she was the 7th of 9 children, and her mother was making bread. So you can see that pregnant woman kind of dancing with the bread. Her mother was making bread when she just arrived. And so, she's this tiny, I'm sure you can tell, she's really petite, she's small, and she would always challenge me to a food contest. She'd be like, let's see who can eat more. And I'd be like, that's not obviously me. Look at me. I'm like 5 times your size. Why are you doing this? She's like, I can eat more than anybody because I was born in the kitchen. And I heard that once, and it was a joke. And the second time I heard that, I was like, I want to know more. What do you mean you were born in the kitchen? And then I discovered she was literally born in the kitchen. And I thought, let's draw your story. And then in that story, you see that little girl having pizza, and there's fried chicken. Those are the foods she loves. And so we started doing these stories as tapestries. And honestly, it wasn't even a project. It was just something I wanted to do because their language was thread. And I thought, okay, let's document this in a language you guys know. And then it turned into a series of products that now sells in Geneva, in New York, and it has enabled me to finance work with that community for almost 5 years. So sometimes you find the stories in the weirdest way. In Pakistan, often over a cup of tea. And this same community then, because of those stories that we did, we ended up getting an order from Chloe to do these bags. And they did them, yeah. Having said that, they were very good about payments, and when you were talking about quality and all of that, they were very, very particular. But I think one of the things that I find kind of distressing about projects like this is that while this is amazing, it's what's definitely going to get me applause in the room. That was the only time Chloe placed orders with that, and I don't expect that to change. And I therefore think This is much more fun because it's more consistent. And people need to eat and make rent and feed their children and, send them to school, etc. every single day. Chloe was amazing. It was a great 6 months, and now it's over. So this was kind of just to, see, this is the kind of photography that we would do. It doesn't tell a complete story, but it's the only story that we possibly can. I just wanted to continue with a few pictures. This is my Baloch leader, who, by the way, now, I've known her 14 years. She's now a local councillor and can be photographed in this way, which is a big deal. And also, she now leads a group of 26 women who make, again, embroidery is huge. Just an interview with one of the senior artisans. And that's it. So we're gonna, that was just a little bit to set context about who I am and where I'm coming from. If you guys have any questions on this part, we can, yes. Oh, that is, it's a bit of a weird name, right? Yeah, I know, and annoyingly, H&M had to go and do another stories. I promise I came first. I hate that store. No, so my co-founder ran this ethical luxury, what do they call it? They called it Gross, the parrot, Polly wants a cracker. And so in a lot of our sort of social media imagery, you'll see Polly, but what we would locally call it, the green parrot, is Mittu. So Mittu, Polly, is just, the idea was to get more international recognition. But yes, mostly so that people would know who we were and our history. And other stories, because we want to tell the stories of so many other people, not just ourselves. So we're kind of like an aggregator platform as well as our own brand. Okay, another part where I'm so sorry if you guys.
So thank you for sharing
thank
all
you.
the work that you're doing. That doesn't always translate in one's sense of belief, like belief in oneself, or
your inner voice,
your inner voice, or even the way that culturally people continue to think about the role of a woman in society. So one of the things that we are seeing as a challenge at work is trying to get women creatives who are, whether it's in whatever discipline of art, to register for things, to show up for things, to show up for exhibitions, to show their work, to talk about their work. And we are trying to figure out where, there's the social demands of a woman that can cause that sense of stuckness in them showing up. Yeah. But I'm curious to know some of the practical approaches that you have used, one, to build relationships with these women, but also because there's so many layers that you shared that could face as a challenge. So what are those practical approaches that you've used? Thank you.
So I think the biggest thing is patience. You need a lot of it. You can't rush this. Like I said, there's a massive trust deficit. Too many women have had brands come into villages, women and men, maker villages, and say, we're going to work with you. And then one season they'll do something and then they're gone. They're no better than Chloe. It's not like our local large brands are any better. One season they want to look kind of like, we care about people. Or there might be this one campaign that they want to do, maybe around Women's Day, maybe around Pakistan Day, because there's national pride. There's something happening there that's motivating them. So they're actually extracting more from that relationship than they're giving. So there's no long-term buy-in. And of course, that is exactly what people believed about me. Look at me, I don't look like them. And I look exactly like the other people who'd come and done that. Is I don't go away. I've been a real problem for them because I'm always there, right? So I'm just like, hi, hello, I'm right here. What happened? You weren't here. What can I do for you? And we also, I think for us, what was really the turning point was COVID. So for 8 months, everything was shut down, our shop. We could not do online sales as well because we obviously were not considered, although I'd argue art is like life, but we were not considered a necessary industry. So we were not allowed to do deliveries. So basically I had to not only take care and pay for my staff, which is very, very small by the way, we're a really lean organization because we don't have money. But anyway, but we hemorrhaged because for 8 months we were paying rent, we were paying salaries and 0 sales. But one thing that I kind of just personally committed to, I was like, I thought it was the end. I was like, well, it was great while it lasted. If I'm going out, I don't want to go out with money in the bank. Let's make sure everybody's fed. I think that changed everything. And I wasn't even trying to buy their love and trust. I just genuinely thought it was. Didn't we all think it was the end? I didn't think we were coming back. Nobody believed it. So, I think just that. And then we've had 2 very apocalyptic floods in the country. And at one point, we work with these traditional block printers. Again, I'll encourage you all to admire Joe's beautiful dress, indigo and resist block print. It's a very particular technique, which we do both in India and Pakistan. So that's called the Dabu technique of resist printing. It's very, very traditional and ancient. I think goes back like 4,000 or 5,000 years. So they had all of our stock, and they were printing. It was a massive campaign that we were doing. And of course, everything drowned. And they expected to be penalized. And I was like, you nearly drowned. I don't care if the fabric's gone. And I know that's not what Christy said, and that sounded sensible this morning. And as I said, I do struggle with the no. But I think that has meant there's a price that you pay for every decision that you take, right? So when I don't say no, believe me, I pay for it in tears and blood and cash all the time. And I pay for it in scale as well, right? Because there are people who are like, she's an idiot. They're probably not wrong. But what I do gain, because everything has 2 sides, is an insane amount of loyalty and commitment. I've never found that bit hard. People always ask me, they're like, don't you find the artisan ensemble hard? I'm like, no, never found that hard. It's, if something, because we've always been there, we're like a giant, crazy almost 7,000 people family. They all know me. Even our sort of enterprises, I've personally been, I know what's going on. I clearly have clones, guys. I should come out, right, and just tell you. I have 3 clones now. But that's it. I think you just have to invest the time. I've been doing this for 10 years. It's not a short amount of time. We're still really, really small, given the scale of what is possible in Pakistan. This is just a dot on the map, but oh, it went away. It doesn't like me anymore. Oh, that's okay. We'll figure it out. But, yeah, I don't know if that answers your question. Yeah, just commit to it. It's kind of like any relationship, right? Like marriage, just show up every day. Yeah. Was there anything else? No? So we're ready to start thinking about narrative decolonization. I know that's an uncomfortable word, and I think I realized, when you realize you have relative privilege in how you've been raised and how you've grown up in your own context, like, of course, Pakistan is not seen as privileged. And in many, many, many ways, we're not. But one thing that I want to start the rest of this conversation is owning my relative privilege, having grown up with not having to worry about sensitivities around colonization. Like, I can say anything I want about colonization and decolonizing, and I can use terms like brown, black, white, quite loosely without anybody getting worried in my part of the world. And I think, Rahul, I see you as well. I think that's the same for India. But when I sit here, I understand that there's tensions here that I'm only now beginning to understand and appreciate. So I just wanted to kind of say that, please know, I come at this from a very, very good place. And if I misstep, it's because it's coming from the ignorance. It's not coming from anything else. And I genuinely believe that everybody in this room wants to make things better and more beautiful, and that we all want to create a fair, inclusive, equal world. So I just wanted to kind of like lead with that, because I was a little concerned, and I spoke to a lot of friends here. I was like, should I do it? Should I not do it? What should I do? And they all said, just do it. So here we are. But the slides are not back. Okay. Oh, they are, yay. I just want you guys to continue to admire the block print, please. I'm just kidding. Oh, there's Mitu. There he is. He keeps coming up in our imagery. Yeah, so that's Polly. So what we'll think about today is 3 basic things. And I say we again. This is, sorry, if you thought you were going to check out and sleep and catch up on your emails, we're going to reclaim our stories, and we're going to talk a little bit about what do I mean when I say narrative decolonization. And I don't just mean that somebody external is needs to be decolonized. We need to decolonize ourselves. We are colonizing ourselves right now as we speak, all of us. I also want to think a little bit about power. I think that's an important part of the conversation that we often miss out, and how you can then use that once you've redesigned power in your supply chains, how you can use that to co-create more ethical partnerships. And finally, how do you protect and scale value? When I started, I said that. I said the value is going to be we leave with a slightly different meaning and attachment to. And that we're going to talk about in the context of cultural IP. So who are you guys? Yeah, I mean, is there anybody who I am missing in this room? I'm assuming you're designers, by your very nature, you're employers, you create livelihoods. your cultural translators, because you're going to represent not only your own brand and your own city or your own family or your own tribe, but also your country and your region. And also, most importantly, and I'm guessing if Zimbabwe is anything like Pakistan, almost critically, your economic actors. Perhaps in a vacuum, because in Pakistan, that's also a problem. There isn't much else. So the decisions that you make are not small. They're not just about, oh, does this look beautiful and who's going to buy it? It's about who owns that value, who receives and benefits from visibility, and who, and this is important, who builds wealth, not just livelihoods, not just incomes. Because I think we're at that point now in 2026 where we need to think about that. If you look at anything powerful in this world, it's not because they have a great salary coming in every month. It's because they built wealth. And I think we're not encouraged, especially as women, we're definitely not encouraged to think about wealth. What are we encouraged to think about? Family. But what do you spend your money on other than family? Thank you, right? We're supposed to be, I mean, I'm overdue for Botox, right? So I'm just saying that's what we're supposed to obsess about all the wrong things. What bag am I wearing? I mean, can you, well, you can't see mine, but I'm just saying I'm not trying to hide them. I don't have the money. No, I'm just kidding. I wouldn't spend on that. But I'm not thinking about, ooh, let me buy some land. Or what's my, like, economic legacy? Are the men thinking about this to some extent relative to women? You are. And that's because how patriarchy has done this to both of us, right? They've told the men that they need to have an economic legacy. And for women, look pretty first, cook in a pretty dress, or whatever else you're supposed to do, I don't know. Be polite, all of that. So the first act of this play, if you will, is asking the core question. What does it mean to build a brand that protects the people behind it? And that includes yourself, right? And who defines that value? So when you're building using craft, as you know, we saw this morning so beautifully, there's a tendency to be extractive because you're taking more than you give back. Again, Batoka was an outlier, I would say, in that market. It was a beautiful example of how you can do things right. But if you look at the global market, including the global fair trade market, and thank you, Christy, for differentiating between what it means to be fair trade, to have a living wage, to have a fair wage, because these are such interchangeable terms depending on the context you're in as well. And I think as a result of that, like I was reading this study that in global fair trade brands, only 4% of the value actually goes to the maker, 4%. With us, we take great pride in saying it's between 50 to 70. So we actually make very little. Our margins are very, very slim. We're a team of 4.5 people, and this includes the cleaner and my salespeople in the store and the e-commerce people. It's not because I love doing so much work. It's because I really, truly, to be able to give the artisans their due, there's no way I can pay anybody else. And that's also why we don't have models that have infrastructure, because that would be really, really expensive to maintain. So there's, as we talked about seasonality, about seasonal storytelling, and the artisan or the maker then in that becomes, the word that we use in our part of the world is producer. I don't know what you call it. What do you call it? Producer, maker? Producers. But when you're building, right, and you're not just extracting, you're not just using, then there's authorship, then you care about that. So if any of you have ever written an academic paper, my God, does it get like petty about whose name's coming first and what's happening, because authorship is so important. But when it comes to other things, like this beautiful shawl, which is, I wish I had things to show you guys. I would love to show off about my country. I can barely stitch a button, just to be clear. But I would love to show off about my people. This shawl is hand woven. I couldn't tell you who made it. So it's made by anonymous. Everything is made by somebody incredibly talented, but anonymous, right? But that would not be the case with, like, for example, the baskets you talked about, right? So when you look at high craft, and often craft in the West, that's not anonymous. It's revered, it's special, and they get to play with it. And we have to meet what? We have to be, Christy, you were talking about when they could make 20 of them that they were identical. That's the pressure on us. We're not allowed to play. We have to make 20 identical pieces, then we're worthy of staying on that same stage. But other people can make quirky baskets, and it's so valuable. And I'm a fan. I'm not saying he shouldn't do it, but I'm just saying you have to look at the politics of that. And then you have to think about which one are you building? Where are you? Are you part of the problem too? Because relative to perhaps the makers, the vendors, the producers you might be working with, you have relative privilege. So we don't just have to look at the West and how our markets in Europe going to respond. We have to look at what we're doing ourselves. Because before we talk about design or scale or exports, we must talk about power, because narrative is power, visibility is power, and documentation, which you so nicely talked about this morning, is power. So who's going to tell the African fashion story? Is it the global buyers? Is it foreign media? Development agencies, I say. And this is important because narrative will belong to whoever builds that infrastructure. So when you're building your infrastructures, you actually have immense power. And you get to be in that position to think about these things while you're designing it. Because global markets, and we're talking about them since this morning, they don't just buy product, we know this, they buy the stories. So the question is, whose story are you selling? Can you think about a little bit about how Zambian craft would be described in export markets right now? Like, what would the first words that come to your mind be? What would the words? Apologies, and thank you for correcting me on that. No, mind that a lot of you talk about it as African. Can I say I am deeply touched by how willing you are to share this with each other? Rahul sitting there, India and Pakistan? Hells no. There's no such thing as South Asian craft. There's Pakistani craft and there's Indian long and very, very ancient shared heritage, but we don't like to admit it. So it's so beautiful to see that you are all willing to do that. And I'm just like, what's wrong with you? Are you okay? But yeah, we're not so easily, yeah. So what would those words be for things from Zim?
I would say that craft is a big word, but the way the word craft is used is not as in the skill of the maker. It's more about it's cheap and it's being made mass market and cutting down trees and just
Really?
And yeah, there's a big export market of like the same bowl that's actually a Kenyan design, but it's being made here and then it's being sent to Kenya because it's cheaper to make it here. So I think that a lot of what we are seeing is craft, but it's not actually craft.
Yeah, I mean, I think we have that problem with China, right? So they can make our craft and sell it back to us much cheaper. But I think where they struggle is the very specific handmade skills. And that's where it's really, really hard to beat India or Pakistan, honestly, because it's just really tough. But I imagine that in our context, I would say the words that are overused are ethnic, tribal, heritage, even handmade, and an artisan now increasingly, right? And they're trying to say something specific. And I want you to hold on to these words because we're going to be doing an exercise a little bit later. But like, how do you move from being described to self-defining? And what would those words be for you? Because we're not trying to be anti-global here, right? We definitely want to export, but we also don't want to be invisible. It really doesn't like me, does it? No. Okay. So when I was thinking of colonization and narratives, I could not think of anybody better than Frantz Fanon. I don't know if you guys are familiar with him. He's a French philosopher who was kind of writing in the 60s about colonization and how to free yourself from that. And he said this specifically about language. And he said that the language of your colonizer, to speak it, is to engage in an act of self-colonization and to embed yourself into a civilization that is committed to your subjugation and to engage with and perpetuate the very structures that. Now, would you agree that fashion is a language as well? Right? So he wasn't just thinking about grammar, is what I'm trying to say. I think he was trying to say something bigger back then. He was talking about allegiance. He was talking about feeling. And he was talking about what happens to your psyche when you learn to see yourself or what you make or your capacity through the eyes of a system that was never built for you. Right? And I would say, and I'm sure many of you will agree, that fashion too is a particular dialect, right? And if you're not speaking in your own, or if you haven't formulated your own, then that entire vocabulary of fabric, of aspiration, of silhouette, well, even for us in Asia, it's shaped by Europe, It's shaped by what Paris wants, right? And I'm part of the problem, right? I talked about Chloe a minute ago, and I expected you guys to be, oops. I hoped you would be impressed, and I think you were, right? So, and that's just the truth of it. I think owning that is, yeah, it is. We seek that. It's in our DNA at this point, right? It's really, really hard to separate you from this. So like, we look for that kind of legitimacy. We design for that kind before we look at local meaning. In our case, it means that we literally grow cotton, but we will value imported textiles more. So if you go to a local fabric market, they'll tell you, bahar ka hai, meaning it's from outside. And that's their key selling point. That's what makes it better. Just the fact from somewhere else, that it's not local. So not local is immediately better. Even if it's actually the worst Chinese quality, the fact that it's not local is good. And, it's the fact that we will call, and I mean, again, guilty. I'm not saying I have a solution to this at all. Welcome to my imperfection lab. It's what we call minimal is modern, but anything which is too colorful it's ethnic. And that immediately says something about the value of it, right? And it means that real success means that you'll be stocked in London versus Lagos, right? So you'll start doing that. I don't know about, I'm not making an aesthetic critique, right? There's this place for everything and we're all allowed to like what we like. I'm just making a critique of power. And the reason I want you to do this now when you start, because I think once you've kind of seeded something with something that is a little bit corrupted, it's often going to show up later in the enterprise and the decisions that you make. I know many of you have been here, but some of you are starting now, and you're still in the early stages where you may want to fix this. I'd advocate for doing it. To internalize a hierarchy in which your heritage is basically raw material is not something that I would want for anybody in this room. Again, based on what little research, because I know a lot about South Asia, and I don't know enough about Africa, and I'm thinking about what textile has meant for Africa in general. And I thought it's been a source of archive, much like it's been for us. It's definitely been ceremonial. Big part of it is for us as well. It's been resistance. It's defined trade routes. I was reading about indigo dyeing in West Africa, and that made me so excited because that's something we share as well. About bark cloth, of course, about the beadwork, the Maasai, which we all know, but also the politics of the wrapper in Nigeria I did not know about. And so I was thinking, oh my gosh, you have these incredible rich histories, and as somebody who's textile obsessed and has admired your garments and your motifs, I didn't know anything about them. And that means that the average consumer knows nothing, right? And that's dangerous, right? So when we allow these motifs, and this is true for our culture as well, when we allow them to be treated as just prints without their meaning, strip them away of everything else, and they're only modernized through Western tailoring, says I. I just want to keep pointing that out because we embody these dichotomies, these contradictions, because it's really hard not to. So something happens, right? It's not local cosmology. Like a lot of our motifs are so layered with meaning, with cosmologies, with ancient myths and legends. I imagine some of yours are as well. Ours are also a product of climate and time. So certain things were done at certain times of the year because a certain fruit would grow and the river would go a certain way. And now when you were trying to do it in a mass-produced way, it just makes absolutely no sense. And of course, I'm not suggesting that any of us live in pre-colonial innocence or that we need to. I mean, am I not the perfect example of what results? And do I not deserve to be here, right? Like if colonization had not happened, I wouldn't stand looking anything like this. I wouldn't be here at all, right? And I like me, and I like being here. So I'm not saying that we have to necessarily go back and rewrite history. I'm just saying that we embrace that hybridity and we look at the fact that something can be both colonial and local, and it can have that residue of colonialism, but it can still be something that we use to self-define ourselves. The point is not purity, and I don't think that's what Fanon was offering either. He knew even in the 60s that it was too late for that. It's not purity, but it's about being conscious. It's about thinking and making that part of your process and become. Who are you dressing? Whose imagination is important here? and who benefits when you don't develop this fluency. So I would say if language is, fashion is language and language is fluency, then you can speak couture and craft at the same time. You can reference ancient ancestral weaving traditions in the same breath as talking about Paris and what's happening on the catwalk there, or whatever the fashion colors are this year. You said it was rust. Thank you for telling me. Cow. Oh, cloud. Oh, that white. Okay, I remember. I remember now. The Pantone. Right. I thought it was something fashion that I'm completely missing. Okay. So you have to like interrogate yourself. Like, how self-colonized are you, and how can you reclaim yourself first? And I think for that, you have to reclaim fashion as your mother tongue, right? In the same way that you would do that, and bring that same lens to it. So I thought maybe I can now stop talking and get you guys to do some work. So I have some worksheets that will help you think through some of this. If you say yes, we can go ahead and do them. Yeah? Find out. We'll just take maybe 2 minutes to do that. Do you need one more? Okay, I wouldn't overthink this, because I'm not taking these back. These are for you guys, obviously. No, I'm not judging. There's no marking. This is just for internal. But if somebody would like to share, that would be really cool. It's a safe space, guys. We're all learning.
And anyone who's ready, you can ask for the mic so that we can also record your response in the recording, please.
So you have to just think about where your business fits on these layers. And it may not fit on all three right now. That's also okay.
Amneh, maybe I can...
Yeah, of course, please.
I can open
That would be
sesame.
great. Open sesame, let's go.
You know, I think for me personally, I think I've been looking at this exercise in terms of the layers of value I bring to be able to, first of all, instead of trying to think of my brand, I'm looking at myself. So in terms of material value, if I was to look at equating the cotton, leather, beadwork, persona. It's what I'm wearing, and maybe even my bodily features, my facial features, how I look after myself and my body. So obviously from a material value perspective, I can then say, okay, if I was being realistic, I could give myself maybe a 60 to 70% being able to show that value and maintain it. Then from a cultural value, my sister Ruchendo mentioned, my totem. Our totem is Gumbi. We are able to bring, chiefs into a room and be able to mediate. That's what we used to do, a long time ago. So that then brings the cultural value, which I think each and every one of us can connect to with our own totems, because our totems and our animals, we all exhibit some little characteristic of an animal if we're to think very intently. And finally, from a systemic value perspective, in terms of job creation, land restored, and the examples you've given, I would think it's in the networks and people who have been able to connect to become better versions of themselves.
No, thank you for that. That was really beautiful. Can I just add something really important highlight something important that you said at the beginning, that everything you wear, that's the first thing people see about you, and you're saying something, and it shows what you value. Right? So it's amazing, but everybody's commented on the camel, right? And for me, that was a way of bringing a little bit of Pakistan into the conversation. And it is a conversation starter. I'm always wearing something handmade, now something from Zimbabwe as well. But all of these are pieces from Pakistan, because that's the easiest thing. For me, jewelry, especially when you're traveling, is an easy way to wear something handmade from your country. And so for me, it's particular, right? If you ask me about different pieces, they are Western inspired, but they're all made in Pakistan. So I think that's important to me. And you're saying something, all of you as designers, when you wear or put something out. Is there anybody else who wants to share? Yeah, please go ahead. Hey, yes.
Okay, so for me, the name of my brand is Teta Couture, which means it's a Ndebele name, which means look beautiful and also feel beautiful. So I'm big on the ethos of saying whenever you look beautiful on the outside, you also feel beautiful on the inside. So in terms of, as a second year cohort, I learned a lot last year from what we did in terms of brand positioning and who you are as a brand. Yeah. So the brand direction that I then took, which I already had it in my mind, but I didn't know how to articulate it. But being part of the whole training process really helped me then to hone in and zone in to know exactly what I wanted with the brand. So the brand stands on an ethos of more storytelling. Who are we as Zimbabweans? I am more now big on trying to showcase, to bring out what makes Zimbabwe Zimbabwe, even through fashion. Be it our landscapes, be it the way we dress, the way we walk, the way we do things. Still feeling beautiful on the inside and outside. Like what we were talking about, colonization, we have all been colonized in our own way, and it has impacted the way that we now see things. So most of the times you'll notice that we love we lean more into the Western culture because those were our colonizers. But I'm trying to say, when we go out there, who is then Zimbabwe? Who are we as a people? And I hope through my works, because it's incremental and gradual, I hope with time, maybe over 5 years, we'll be able to see that. So with that background in mind, I would say material value. I'm now big on trying to incorporate, in terms of the brand, their cotton, their leather, especially if it is coming from Zimbabwe, and being more of a beader. And I hope in this room there are also people who are doing beadwork, or who know artisans who are so good on beadwork, so that I can even incorporate it in my work. Because I'm doing it, but I'm not 100% professional. But I hope also, because we are here as creatives, people know people who know. Yeah. So if they could help. And then on cultural value, I'll just give a background of even the show that we'll be having on Saturday, to say I've tried to then to incorporate what we are doing as who we are as Zimbabweans through our landscapes, through what makes Zimbabwe, be it we take pride in our national flower, the flame lily. In our big five, we always talk about the elephants, We talk about the leopard. We talk about the all the 5 animals that we've got. And I'm trying to say, when we go out there, or even when people see the story out there, they can say, oh, this is one of the big 5. And we're actually having problems with people who want to cull. I heard that our national head is so big now. And we are trying to trim it down. And we have anti-poaching. So those are the stories that I'm trying to tell through my collections. And then, and so it's more about storytelling. I'm sure you also see, some have already seen the Great Zimbabwe piece, where we talk about our Great Zimbabwe, because it's not all of us who have managed to get to Mashingo to see the stone structure. But I said, how beautiful it will be to actually see that stonework in motion. Imagine if Great Zimbabwe was just start walking. It would be nice. So, and then in terms of systemic value, and as a disclaimer, I said I'm talking about the brand because that's what I know better. Systemic value, I've realized the importance of job creation, particularly in terms of our women, because I think women are marginalized almost all over. It's not only in Pakistan.
No, it's a global
because
issue.
they also carry the biggest burden in terms of, they are the ones who have to look after the kids. There was recently a story, I think about a week ago, about water shortages in Bulawayo, and we were told that women right now are the ones who are mainly carrying the load in terms of even the buckets, walking the longer distance. And then you think to yourself, when will they then get the time to be even creative, to think better, to see other things out there? So those are the things that I'm trying to champion by also training women in the small way that I can. Whenever I can, I train women, and I also try to pay maybe fairly where I can. Remember also we have Zimbabwe economy. In as much as they're saying you're poor, we have our own struggles in Zimbabwe.
No, I understand that, and I actually want to address that if I can. Like, I think we have similar issues in Pakistan. So I think what we've done at Poly is we don't just have high craft. So when we started, we're still considered expensive, of course. It's impossible to not be expensive and pay somebody fairly. So if you go on our Google page, one of the negative comments that we get is, beautiful store, da 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 da, so expensive, because it's always the locals who are saying this. But we have our standard response to that, which is like, we're saying, why don't you read this report? Here's what we've done. And then people kind of begin to understand. But I think for us, it means that we're not necessarily looking at only sort of the highest levels we can go to. So over time, we are now the kind of store that, because we need repeat customers, and we need, as I said, a very large population needs to keep employed and busy. To keep 1,700 artisans busy means that I cannot stay just at, we're only going to do this very niche thing, which is going to sell a couple of times a year. We can't do that, unfortunately. And for me, that was important. Other brands can take a different decision. They can be like, we're going to stay here, and we're going to service maybe less people, but create greater value, or like elevate that product. So you have to think about that for yourself. And whatever makes sense to you is, again, what you have to kind of figure out where your heart, will you be able to sustain whatever you're doing, right? So if I'm making, like we make these teacups, which are quite cheap, and they sell like crazy. Everybody's always buying them, mugs, cups, and they employ hundreds of people. So they're a great product because they employ a lot of people. Are they special? Not that special, but are they great for livelihoods? You have to figure out what's important for you. Is there anybody else who'd like to share? Otherwise, there's another worksheet that I want to give out. And I want you guys to keep these and just keep thinking about them as you're sort of, you said that you did. Yeah, did you want to go ahead? Did you want to go ahead? Not really. No pressure. You can do the second worksheet. How's that?
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you.
So one of the things that's really good to do very early in your enterprise is to kind of map your ecosystem. And that could look like artisans for some people, or craftspeople, or villages that you work with. Or it could look like vendors or people who are finishing your products. It could even just be people who are making up like your shoppers or your boxes, right? Because these are all people you work with. It might be graphic designers. It's going to look different, obviously, for everybody. I'm happy that's bringing you joy. Does that mean that power is very equitably shared in your ecosystem? It's not. That's a very powerful man right there. So bad. So maybe instead of presenting it, since if everybody doesn't want to, you can just talk about it to the person next to you and just share where you are in terms of your business. So one lens that I'd encourage you to shift is don't just think about scale and growth. Think about surrendering some leverage as well.